Candida, when it's exposed to B complex vitamins in your gut, the carbohydrates that are present at the time, the B vitamins will break down like they're supposed to and convert them into simpler sugars, which is what they're supposed to do. But then that goes to feed the Candida. So the Candida then becomes a hog, a B complex hog. People with low B12, it's very common. Chronic low B12 people very often have Candida, especially low iron, because Candida absorbs huge amounts of iron from your body.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friend, welcome back to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm Jenn Trepeck, your host and health coach, here with you every week for wellness without the weirdness. And over the 6 years of this show, we have had many episodes on gut health and many episodes on hormones. Today, we're going to connect the dots between your hormones, your thyroid, and Candida, which is a yeast or a fungus that lives on and in your body. So to help us learn more, we have an incredible guest. He is the founder of the Biamonte Center for Clinical Nutrition. He is the co-creator of BioCybernetics, which is an unprecedented computer software program that's able to study blood work, mineral tests, and many other lab tests to determine exactly where your body is imbalanced, initially designed for aerospace purposes. As a practitioner for over 30 years, he is dedicated to improving the lives of his patients and helping them get back to living. He holds a doctorate of naturopathy and is a New York State certified clinical nutritionist. He is a professional member of the International and American Association of Clinical Nutritionists, the American College of Nutrition, and is a member of the Scientific Advisory Board for the Clinical Nutrition Certification Board. He is listed in the Directory of Distinguished Americans for his research in nutrition and physiology. I'm honored to introduce him to all of you, Dr. Michael Biamonte.
Thank you for the fanfare.
Yeah, you're welcome. Welcome officially to Salad with a Side of Fries.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. So we'll start with your story and a bit more of your background and then go from there after we tell our members what they're getting this week. So for our members of the Happy Healthy Hub, by the way, if you're not a member, I highly recommend the Happy Healthy Hub is the next best thing to working with me as your health coach. Each week, you get a recipe delivered to your inbox. You get curated articles and additional discounts from me and our partners. You get interview episodes like this one in full video, plus behind-the-scenes content, a community with the ability to post and comment on each other's posts, plus access to the 24/7 AMA or Ask Me Anything to target your specific questions or challenges. You can upvote other people's questions, see past questions and answers, and so much more. All of this, by the way, the Happy Healthy Hub is yours for just $12 a month, or save over 15% if you prepay for the year. So for our Happy Healthy Hub, your recipe this week is for vegan almond butter chocolate chip cookies. They are, right? Sounds good. They are great as a pre-workout option. And then from Dr. Biamonte, we have 2 articles, one called Dr. Biamonte Candida Chronicles Overview, and the other is Microbiome and Hashimoto's. So I just want to say, you want to read these articles. So for these articles and the recipe, plus the episode in full video, access to our community chat, and the 24/7 Ask Me Anything, go to asaladwithasideofries.com/membership. From there, you click subscribe now and follow the prompts to enter your payment info, create your login to access the hub and all of your benefits. Remember, you're going to asaladwithasideofries.com/membership. This supports the health of you, your loved ones, your community, and of course, it helps keep the show going for, 6 years and counting. On top of this week's episode in full video with behind-the-scenes pieces, your 24/7 Ask Me Anything, you're going to get this week's recipe for the vegan almond butter chocolate chip cookies, and 2 articles from Dr. Biamonte, one called Dr. Biamonte's Candida Chronicles Overview, and the other is Microbiome and Hashimoto's. Okay, Dr. Biamonte, if I remember correctly, you're a musician.
Yes.
Who then went back to school to become a naturopath when your father was ill. Will you share that story and how your focus has evolved over the years to become, what it is today?
Well, I was very curious when my father was ill, and I asked a lot of questions, which the doctors didn't like. Mainly, I was wondering, like, where does nutrition fit in? Because I was reading, and well, my father actually got me involved in reading Carlton Fredericks and a lot of the nutritionists of that era, like the original pioneers of the whole field. And I was very curious. I was asking them, where do vitamins fit in? Where back in those days, Laetrile from Mexico was just making a big boom, and it was being discovered that it actually cured some people of cancer. So I was asking all these questions. They didn't want to talk to me. They just wanted to push me away. So instinctively, when you ask people questions and they don't want to answer or they don't want to talk about it, there's usually something there to know. They don't know or they don't want you to know one way or the other. So that's how I initially got involved in studying. And it started to become just an obsession after a while because the more I learned, the more the potential I saw was there. And the more I was surprised that nobody was really picking this up. At the time I first started studying, there were two functional medical doctors in all of New York City. There was Dr. Bob Atkins and there was Ronald Hoffman, and that was it.
Mhm.
And now you can't go down the block without having a whole slew of functional doctors all over. So I was just very surprised. So that really got my interest. And then I went to naturopathic school. And when I went to naturopathic school at that time, there were only two or three in the whole country. And I had to spend practically every day in the library because we didn't have the internet. So in order to find it wasn't like you could ask AI, the
Right.
questions. I had to be in the library all day, and I had to really learn how to research and how to find answers. And by the time I got out of naturopathic school, I had developed somewhat of an expertise in interpretation of laboratory work, blood work, because I had studied Jim Sema's work. I studied quite a few with like the barnstorming chiropractors who were reinterpreting standard blood work. They could take standard blood work and they could read way past the pathology. They could read into what was happening organically with your body as far as your vitamins and your minerals and organ gland functions. Nowadays, a lot of the things I studied and was discovering then are now standard, but back then it was brand new. And I wanted to develop a computer. This is 1984 now, 85, when PCs were just first coming out. So my idea was to have a computer that I could input patient data and the computer would then do the whole analysis and print out a whole explanation of narration and instructions for the person on what to take, how to take it, what to do, diet instructions. So I was slowly assembling some computer programmers to help me do this. And at one day I happened to be in a health food store and I was telling the woman who worked behind the counter what I wanted to do. And she looked at me and she reached for a business card and she says, "You have to talk to this man. He's already doing this. And you'll be really happy to talk to him because he's very enlightened on all this." And I look at the card, the man's name was Robert Santoro, naturopath, and it turned out he worked at Grumman Aerospace. He was an aerospace physiologist, and he already assembled a whole team of people that was putting this computer program together, including his son, who was a PhD in computer programming. And he happened to be the same man who developed the life support systems on the lunar module, which blew my mind right there. So I went and met him. He gave me a tour of Grumman. I looked at some of the spacecraft that had returned to Earth, were picked up out of the ocean, and it was just fascinating. And then we started talking about what he was doing. I didn't really know much about computer language, but he was explaining to me that what they were doing was assembling a model of the human body. They first took Harper's biochemistry and they took different books on physiology, and they put that in the computer as the base, and they were using a Fortran language. And Fortran language is very interesting because it's not like your standard computer program where if you want to change something, you've got to rewrite a lot of the program. Fortran is based on blocks. And if you can insert different blocks in different places, when you find out something new that belongs there, which made this incredibly easy to just update the computer when we learned more physiological data. So I started working with him. Before I knew it, 8 years had gone by, and we had a working model of the whole human body. Now, the whole idea of this was NASA wanted this because they wanted to be able to check the astronauts when they were in the space station for long periods of time to watch their nitrogen balance, look for calcium loss and things like that. And the spending just got out of hand on the project. Because we were flying nutritionists in from all over the world and having them putting them up in hotels for weeks, and they were contributing all their data, but I don't think NASA really had that in mind to pay for something like that. So they eventually dropped the project, and we said to them, well, what do we do with this? And they said, keep it.
Amazing.
So we kept it, and we turned it into a commercial program that doctors could access. So a doctor can send his patient's data in, and we run it through the computer. We get a printout, we send it back to him. And the computer speaks only in physiology. It doesn't speak in the disease, let's say. So the computer will look and it will find that your hypothalamus isn't properly connecting hormones to the pituitary, and that's due to a magnesium imbalance, and it'll tell you how much magnesium to take to fix it and whatnot. And we were just getting amazing results with people back then. This is like now probably 1987, 88. And there was an odd thing is we noticed that there was a certain group of people who just had strange reactions to the vitamins that we put them on. And when we further explored, we found these same people also had weird reactions when they took drugs of any kind. So I volunteered to find out what was going on.
Is it a methylation thing?
No, well, here's what we found out. And whenever I tell the story, my wife would tell you that she walked into this room and she saw me at a desk with a pile of folders higher than I was. And I was looking through all these folders to try to find common denominators. And what I found is they had some kind of imbalance in their intestinal tract. Now, we didn't know what exactly it was, but we knew there was some imbalance because they had a configuration in their white blood cells that would indicate some kind of infection or an immune response going on in their intestines. So we researched this further when we found out they all had Candida. So what was happening is when they were taking vitamins, the vitamins were interacting with the Candida and it gave them crazy reactions because that happens with Candida. So I didn't really know what Candida was. I knew very little about it. So I started researching it and I found out what it was, essentially that it was a fungal overgrowth in your intestines. And this fungus could switch back and forth from a fungus to a yeast. And I looked up and I saw there were medications that would kill it. So I told the patients, I said, go to your doctor, tell him you have Candida, have him cure you and come back. And then we'll put you back on the program and it should work fine at that point. Man, was I dumb. I was naive. The phone calls I got that my doctor says there's no such thing as Candida, or my doctor says everybody has Candida. It was just ridiculous. So I sent them to Dr. Atkins and Dr. Hoffman. And the phone calls came back and they said, well, this patient said this was much better. They knew what you were talking about. And they put me on nystatin and I got better for the first 2 months and then it all started to come back. And they even raised the dose and it got worse. And I'm thinking to myself, what? That doesn't make sense. So I just started collecting data from these people on how they were being treated and what direction it went. And I did something that nowadays everyone's heard of. It's called reverse engineering. I took the data and I hit the textbooks and I went back to find out what was the reason this was occurring. And the first thing I found out that was a major breakthrough that I cover in my book, The Candida Chronicles, is that Candida is very mutative and it genetically mutates very easily, which most people don't pay attention to, even though the data exists in the literature. So the first thing I did with these patients is I had them start taking antifungals that they rotated every 4 days. And I learned in the textbooks that when you expose Candida to the same antifungal for longer than 21 days, it then begins to mutate. And it mutates, it can mutate against that drug or it can jump species. So initially in my practice, when we were taking stool cultures from patients, we found that none of the patients who came to us who knew about Candida, who had been treating it, had Candida albicans. They all had Candida glabrata or Candida tropicalis, which are mutated species, which immediately told me that they were being treated in a way that would allow the Candida to mutate. Then we observed that all the patients who came who knew nothing about Candida, never heard of it, they're the ones who had Candida albicans. So they had the original species, and the people who were treated incorrectly by not rotating the antifungals, they had the advanced species of Candida. And this went on. I just kept collecting. I just shut up and listened. And I just took notes. I got all the data I could from these people. And I then just reversed engineered each thing. Like people would come in and say, I'm taking all these probiotics and I keep taking these stool tests and they don't show up in the stool. So that's where I discovered that the Candida would repel the probiotics. And it wasn't until you essentially got rid of their Candida or their dysbiosis, however you want to call it, that the probiotics would be able to reinoculate in the colon. And then we had people who were taking all these vitamins. And that's then where I found out there was two groups of vitamins when you deal with Candida. There's one group that makes the Candida worse by physically feeding it and spreading it. And there's another group that will block the medications that you're taking. And that's generally most antioxidants. So we pulled all the people off the vitamins, and then all of a sudden the treatment started to work. So I continued in this fashion until I got all the data together on what would be, let's say, the axioms that you would need in order to have a Candida program that was workable. And then we put the protocols together.
Yeah, no, I identify so much with how you went about this because I feel like my brain works the same way. I'm like, okay, if I just follow the logic, right? I don't necessarily know everything about the pathology, but I can apply logic of what we do know of how the body works and things like that. And so at the risk of opening a can of worms and a total sidebar, it seems like you were so ahead of your time and creating a program that is now essentially, I think, what people hope AI will do
True.
in medicine.
And this program was based on the original versions of AI because the program will think. The more the person comes and the more they have their data put through the computer has a retest module where it actually looks over all of the testing they've had, all the supplements they've had, and it looks for what worked the best for them over the whole long period of time. So yes, was the original AI.
Yeah. And so, like I said, at the risk of opening a can of worms, I'm really curious to hear, how do you see AI playing into or advancing, kind of what you started and what you've built to date?
It's really simple because, and anyone will tell you this, whether they're learned in it or a novice, it's only as good as how you teach it.
Right.
It's that simple. It can only be as good as what you teach it. So luckily in our system, there are enough restrictions there to keep it focused. So it's not going to go wild into, tangents. So yeah, that's important because you need to keep the focus and keep it consistent with what it's looking at and not allow too many other variables that don't have anything to do with what it's supposed to be looking at to look at.
Yeah. Okay. So before we get to your Candida protocol, I think it's probably worth addressing two things to make sure everybody's with us. So one piece is, you say it's a rumor that Candida is a protective mechanism.
Oh, totally. It's
Say
ridiculous. More. It's absolute. I think I know who started this, and he's a well-known doctor in the Midwest who has a clinic there. A lot of people have been to. And one of his things is that he will tell people that until you get rid of your mercury, you can never fully get rid of the Candida. And then he talks about how it's a protective response, which why I say that's ridiculous is because mercury, first off, it is true that Candida absorbs large amounts of mercury. That's what this premise is based on, that Candida absorbs the mercury and that's supposed to be protecting you from the mercury. Well, the problem with that is that Candida reduces fecal IgA and fecal IgE. So that means immediately when your intestinal tract is exposed to mercury, it depresses your immune system. That blows the whole theory right there because it's suppressing the immune system like an antibiotic would essentially. Antibiotic would suppress your intestinal immune system by wiping out your friendly flora, which is part of your immune system. Well, mercury is doing the same thing, only a little bit differently. It's suppressing so if you suppress the intestinal immune system with mercury and Candida grows, how does that protect the mechanism? It's illogical.
Right. Rather, it's preventing the protection against the Candida, right?
There you go.
Okay. And then the second piece is what somebody might be experiencing that could be an indication of Candida overgrowth. So you mentioned response to supplements or response to medications.
Yeah, bad reactions.
Already.
Bad reactions. It's very common in people with Candida and leaky gut. Even with their own medications prescribed, they have crazy reactions, and doctors keep jumping them from one medication to the other, not understanding what's going on. But yes, it's bad reactions to supplements, particularly to B complex, to coenzyme Q10, and to minerals like calcium or copper in particular. They can have a lot of bad reactions too.
And bad reactions might look like what?
It's an exacerbation of the Candida. So it's strange because you don't know what's going to happen because you don't know how their Candida is affecting them, you see? Because Candida affects everyone the same. Well, it doesn't affect everyone the same. You could list out 150 different possible symptoms that Candida can cause. And you're never going to find one person and another person with the same exact symptoms, because Candida, just like many other things of this nature, stresses out whatever your genetic weaknesses are to the point where that's how the symptom manifests. But there are some common symptoms that evolve when you develop Candida. And usually the very first thing is you have a drop in energy and you start having cognitive problems. You start becoming tired, you don't know why, and you start walking into rooms and saying, why did I walk into this room? What was I doing here? Or what's his name again? That guy, your cognitive function goes. Then you can start developing noticeable gastrointestinal symptoms. You can start becoming constipated. Depending on your flora, you could either be constipated or have diarrhea. But bloating and gas and discomfort when you eat is very common. Inability to digest, let's say, very common. Then you could escalate up to rashes, skin rashes. Eczema is very common. If you do a search for Candida and eczema online, you'll come up with over 15 million documents. Then when it gets really bad, you can start feeling arthritic, because Candida will cause inflammation generally through your body, particularly in your joints. And then one of the last steps of Candida, which is probably the most severe, something we used to call years ago universal reactor syndrome, which is nowadays somebody who's in chronic mast cell activation and who is just intolerant of the whole environment. This person cannot go into a bar and sit down with people smoking and wearing perfume and be able to tolerate it without having a booming headache. So that this person can't go in the supermarket and walk down the aisle where the cleaning solutions are. The odors from the cleaning solutions will just drive them crazy. So that's where the person is now becoming very chemically sensitive. From that, they can develop also allergies they never had before. Now, if it gets extreme, Candida can cause cancer, like other parasites can, similar. But you could say that's a general lineup that a lot of people can have, but then you throw in their own genetic individuality and you have their particular case.
Yeah, it's so funny as you're saying. And so in the first part of that list where it's the, walk in this room and can't remember why, right? A lot of those things we associate with the B vitamin deficiency. So then the irony, or not so ironic, that then, a B complex would create a reaction for these same people too. So it's all connected.
It is, because with
Yeah.
Candida, when it's exposed to B complex vitamins in your gut, the carbohydrates that are present at the time, the B vitamins will break down like they're supposed to and convert them into simpler sugars, which is what they're supposed to do. But then that goes to feed the Candida. So the Candida then becomes a hog, a B complex hog. People with low B12, it's very common. Chronic low B12 people very often have Candida, especially low iron, because Candida absorbs huge amounts of iron from your body. And people with Candida will be found to be anemic. But then when they take iron to try to resolve the problem, the Candida gets worse and the problem gets worse. And that's the unique thing about Candida, why it's so interesting, that it's set up to cause these toadstools where you think you're actually helping yourself, and helping yourself theoretically for other people would be true, but you're making it worse.
Right. So I think this is the perfect, transition into the Candida protocol that we want to walk through. Really quick, let's pause to highlight our partner for this episode. Big thanks to Snap Cleaning Products for supporting Salad with a Side of Fries. Make household and industrial cleaning a snap with their eco-friendly, economical, multi-purpose Snap products. Snap's concentrated multi-purpose formulas perform light to industrial strength jobs all in one bottle. Snap products give you the cleaning power of a variety of cleaners, saving you time, money, and valuable storage space. And Snap products are developed with the environment in mind, using plant-based ingredients that are biodegradable, phosphate-free, non-toxic, and bottled and recyclable containers. Now, what I love about Snap products is that they simply work. The products are safe and powerful because they are made of enzymes that actually break down the organic stains and the material to remove them rather than just covering them up. The triple enzyme laundry detergent is just $13.95 for 40 ounces and does up to 80 loads of laundry. It's truly free of chemicals and additives. The dish soap is $11.95 for 32 ounces. Or maybe you're ready to upgrade all of your household cleaning products in one fell swoop, which you can do with the Snap Pack for just $89.95. These prices are also before your discount. Because you're a Salad with a Side of Fries listener, you get 10% off and free shipping. So simply text the word CLEAN, CLEAN, to 833-801 0500. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, text the word CLEAN, CLEAN, to 833-801-0500 to try Snap, in particular the triple enzyme laundry detergent or the dish soap or the Snap Pack for 10% off plus free shipping. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply.
These products are very important for patients with Candida because patients with Candida are very chemically intolerant. And products like this, because they work based on enzymes, don't have any of the chemical residue that are going to set off their mast cell activation.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So thinking about overgrowth of Candida, and we talked about even just before some of the things that can sort of create that mutation and the overgrowth of Candida. Will you connect this also to our hormones, right? So we're sort of understanding what's happening with Candida. What's the connection then to our hormones?
There's several, and this was never known before. But Candida and your whole biome regulates your hormones. Your neurotransmitters and your hormones are stored in your intestinal tract, and they're somewhat shuttled in and out between your intestinal tract and your bloodstream as your body needs to draw on them. And when you have dysbiosis, that doesn't go very well. So you end up having people with chronically low serotonin because of their gut being imbalanced. The body can't pull the serotonin out of the gut and bring it back into the blood. That's one issue. The other issue is hormones have a direct effect on Candida, particularly estrogens and cortisol. Estrogens and cortisol make Candida grow, and it's particularly estriol that makes Candida grow. So this is why when women are pregnant, if they have Candida, the Candida will flare up. It's because of the estriol elevating. This is why people under stress can develop Candida, and the Candida gets worse under stress because of the cortisol. So hormones can regulate and modulate Candida, and unfortunately, Candida tends to interfere with thyroid function. There's a few things that it does, but one of the most notable things I say is that the dysbiosis that you get from Candida is probably the underlying reason for Hashimoto's. I think most of my colleagues would agree by now that all Hashimoto's is underlying dysbiosis or Candida, and you're never going to fix Hashimoto's on anyone unless you handle their gut. Years ago, we used to use a standard processed product that was called parotid, and we used to give it to people with Hashimoto's and would bring their antibodies down. The whole Hashimoto's would just shut down as long as they were on the supplement. Once they went off the supplement, it would go right back up again, and that's because we didn't handle the underlying reason, which was the dysbiosis.
So what testing might somebody want to do to confirm, based on this conversation, they might be sitting here going, okay, I think this is me. Mm-hmm. Potentially before starting your protocol that we'll go to in a second, what testing might they want to use? And frankly, what testing might they want to push back on? Because as we know, different physicians have different philosophies or, things that they'll work with.
The first thing you want to avoid is blood testing for Candida. When someone talks about this, their instinct is to think the blood test is looking for Candida in their blood, which is not what the blood test is doing. The blood test is looking for antibody response to see if your immune system is producing antibodies against Candida. And your immune system could continue to produce antibodies against Candida for 9 to 10 months after it was gone. So that makes it not that accurate in terms of present time, what's really happening. Probably the tests I rely on the most are organic acid tests for Candida. We also have a test that's used only in my practice that I developed, which looks at metabolic wastes from Candida in your urine and looks for free radicals that are produced by Candida in your urine, which makes it a really great test because a patient can do that at home in 10 minutes, and we can know immediately what's happening with their Candida at that time. Stool tests for Candida can be very difficult because Candida doesn't grow in a very uniform manner in your intestines. Bacteria grow very uniform. They pretty much just cover everything nicely. Candida grows in a splotty, blotchy kind of pattern. If you could take a flashlight and walk through your intestines, you'd be walking through and the flashlight and you're going to see bacteria everywhere. Then all of a sudden you'll come up to this blob of mucus and biofilm and Candida and parasites all together. And that may go on for a few feet, and then you walk past that and it's gone, and then there's nothing again. And then you may come up to that again at another 20 feet or something. So The Candida just doesn't grow in a manner that makes stool testing practical for it, because you don't know if that stool made contact with that area where the Candida was long enough to then come into the sample and then be duplicated when you try to culture it. Even with DNA stool tests, it can be, you have run into the same thing. But if you know how to interpret a stool test, I will give you the keys. How you know someone most likely has Candida by looking at one of the modern stool tests like GI effects or something like that, is you want to look at the stool pH. If the stool pH is above 7.2, 7.4, they good chance they have Candida, because the Candida likes an alkaline intestinal tract. That's the first thing. There's the pH normally between 6 and 7.2 is a pH that stops Candida because that acidity suppresses it. Okay. Next thing you want to look for is friendly bacteria. If the person has a lack of lactobacillus and a lack of bifidus bacteria, most likely Candida is there, even though you're not seeing it. There are some other bacteria that tend to grow with Candida. Klebsiella and Citrobacter tend to grow with Candida. Blastocystis hominis is very often found with Candida. Then you want to look at the fecal IgA or IgE. If that immune response is suppressed, probably have Candida. Calprotectin is another item to look at in the stool. If that's very high, they most likely have Candida. So when you're putting all these things together, these items, and also they're short-chain fatty acids. If they're deficient in butyrate, probably have. So the more of these items that they have showing up, the more likely they have Candida, even if their commensal flora is imbalanced. So the more of these items you can check off, the more likely they are to have Candida, even though the stool test is not going to find Candida. But it's expected, I would say, then you're not going to find it. It's difficult to find in the stool.
Okay. Super helpful. So that brings us to your 4 R's to remove and replace, right?
Mhm.
Your 4 stages of, Candida growth. So walk us through how we can support sort of matching antifungals to the timing and how we go about this.
The first thing we do is we put the person on a bowel cleanse that consists of diatomaceous earth and MSM and other things, other types of fibers and whatnot. And we also give them castor oil capsules that we have them freeze. And the reason why we freeze them is castor oil will give you a purge if you take it, which is not what we want. We want the castor oil to pass through your stomach and then break down in your intestinal tract and be able to coat the intestinal tract, because the castor oil will loosen up biofilm.
So I was going to ask about a biofilm buster. So you're using the castor oil for that.
Initially.
Okay.
The castor oil will break down biofilm and it will help loosen up everything that's there, because a lot of the Candida will hide in old stool and feces that's hanging out and mucus that's hanging out. So that's the first thing we do, is we have them do this type of a program. We call it phase 0, and that removes the surface areas or the surface layers, the big chunks. Then we go to phase 1. So on phase 1, we have them rotate usually 4 different antifungals or combinations of antifungals that will kill the Candida systemically. So these are products that have to be able to absorb into your lymph and your blood and kill the Candida everywhere. On that note, people will say, I have systemic Candida. And if they go to their medical doctor and they say to the medical doctor, I have systemic Candida, the medical doctor is going to look at them like they're crazy, because the medical definition of systemic Candida, it means it's in your blood. It would be fungal sepsis, and you're going to die soon. So there's no way you're going to be standing up at my office telling me you have systemic Candida. When people say systemic Candida, they mean the Candida has gone from their colon into their lymph system and traveled through the lymph system and now is invading different organs, because your entire lymph system drains into your colon. So that's what they mean by that. So that's phase 1. We systemically address Candida. On phase 2, we switch the antifungals to antifungals that are fatty acid based, because fatty acid based antifungals can absorb really deep into your gut lining and they can literally kill the Candida at the root. And that's what's needed on the second phase. So when we've accomplished that, and then, by the way, on that phase, we also use different biofilm busters that work deeper in the gut lining. Then the next phase would be the probiotic phase. Now, if the person's done these previous 3 steps correctly, the probiotics should stick. The only thing that will prevent the probiotics from not sticking at that point is if they have leaky gut. So if they have leaky gut, we have to repair the gut before they get to this step. Assuming they don't have leaky gut, the easiest way to do is we give them a whole bunch of different probiotics with a whole bunch of different prebiotics. And we have them mix it into a smoothie, and we have them drink it a few times a day, and it's simple and it's done. And the combination of the fibers and the prebiotics give the probiotics what it needs to feed on so we can grow into your intestinal tract. Usually the first reaction they get to that is bloating and gas. And they're, oh my God, the Candida is coming back. But that's not what's actually happening. When your friendly bacteria begins to grow and re-inoculate your intestines, it produces bloating and gas because it's fermenting, just like the Candida would, only this is a good fermentation the person has. But if the person has leaky gut, it's not going to work. You've got to handle their leaky gut. And the two best tests to determine if you have leaky gut, number one would be zonulin protein, which you can do in the blood or the stool. And the other is a breath test. It's called the sucrose breath test. It's a breath test completely different than for SIBO or H. pylori. It's a breath test that's particularly for leaky gut because there are certain gases your intestinal tract will produce if you have leaky gut.
So with all of this then, right, and taking into account the hormone pieces and the thyroid pieces, what's then the cascade from repairing the, Candida overgrowth and potentially leaky gut and all those things to the rest of the imbalance and what we were experiencing?
Once you get your flora settled and your flora is solid, all these other things are easier. So you can knock the person's Hashimoto's out, you can get their thyroid in better balance. All of these other things will respond. And the thing that I learned the hard way is that 9 out of 10 times when you restore the person's flora, you're going to find they have exhausted adrenals and exhausted thyroid. 9 out of 10 times. That's the very next thing that's going to happen. But before you can address that, you first have to assess their toxicity level. Because when you have Candida, you cannot properly detoxify. Your phase 2 detoxification and even phase 1 is limited when you don't have bifidus in your colon, because bifidus helps your liver detoxify. So anyone who's had Candida very easily could have toxic levels of mercury and copper and all types of chemical toxins that their body's not able to get rid of because the Candida was blocking that. So the first thing we look for before we address their adrenals, which could be suppressed by the elevated copper, is we look for toxic metals. If there are toxic metals there, then we handle the toxic metals, we chelate them out, and then we look for toxic chemicals. Now, why we do it in that order is because toxic metals prevent your body from being able to release toxic chemicals. So you've got to get rid of the metals first, and then the chemicals will come out easily. And there are many tests for this nowadays. Mosaic Labs has a few tests to assess somebody's environmental toxic chemicals. And we use hair analysis and also urinary challenges to assess the toxic metals in the body. But keep one thing in mind. Hair tests tell you the tissue level of the toxic metals. Urine tests tell you the ability of the person to excrete the metals. So you could get a huge excretion on your initial provocation, but that may be all there is. You don't know that means they have tons of metals. That's why you need the hair test to see what the tissue level is. Because the urine test is ultimately telling you how much they can eliminate.
Eliminate, yeah. It's so interesting because I think, our objective is not for everyone to run out panicking that, that everybody has Candida, but to really open everyone's eyes. I think this is such a great example of how interconnected the body is to help us understand that addressing things in isolation or hyper-focusing on one piece in isolation is really part of, I think, one of the challenges as people talk about wellness, as they do now.
Yeah, it's been a huge challenge in the medical field, whether they know it or not, because you go to an eye doctor and the eye doctor is able to look at the eye, but he can't touch this part of it. He's going to send you to another guy who can touch this part. And then he can't touch the other part, so he has to send. So it can become ridiculous. As someone who worked with engineers for years, and engineers who are looking at the body, it's the most logical way to look at it because the body is a mass of subsystems that are all linked to major systems that are all linked to some systems up above that are controlling everything on the way down. That's where we got the name BioCybernetics. BioCybernetics means the biological way of monitoring systems that are self-regulating, because a cybernetic system is the body is self-regulating. It's a biological system that tries to be, anyway. It's for the most part self-regulating, and we want to correct it where it goes off the rails and put it back on the rails, and then it'll do fine.
And the way to do that is to understand why it thinks that
Mhm.
that is the appropriate way to self-regulate.
And here's where you run into problems because the longer someone's been imbalanced, the body's through homeostasis starts to begin to think that's the way it's supposed to be. So sometimes when you put someone on a health program, when they're trying to straighten these things out they've had for years, you're going to meet resistance because the body has feedback loops in the endocrine system that are locked in to thinking, well, this is the way it's been, this is the way it should be. And then when you get the person out of that, they feel strange until they get rebalanced, which
Yes.
is something that usually it will happen gradually, regardless of how hard you push it. Patients are always saying, why doesn't this go faster? I'm feeling better, but why is it taking so long? Well, it's because your body is stubborn, essentially.
Yes. Well, I think that's a beautiful place to sort of wrap this up and bring it full circle, that the body really, it simply takes time and appropriate protocols and understanding, as you said, how the systems,
Yeah, but you're
self-regulate and
correcting
interconnect.
you're correcting the underlying reason. You're not taking a drug to cover up the symptom, which is what the pharmaceutical industry has become rich in giving people drugs to cover up their symptoms. Here, you're trying to actually fix the real problem, which takes a lot longer.
Yes. Awesome. All right. It is time for our rapid fire off topic questions that I ask every expert who joins us. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week? Or what's the salad and what's the fries of your week?
Let's say probably the best thing is I developed a new liver cleanse product, which I've been trying on myself, which is working really well.
Nice.
Really well. And how you know a cleansing product is working well is usually when you take it and you feel sick from it, or you develop bad breath or a body odor or something. That's your body really detoxifying. Probably the worst thing was the lasagna, I guess.
But it sounds delicious.
Yeah, especially when you're Italian.
Right. All right. If you were the founder of the Biamonte Center for Clinical Nutrition, what would you do?
Probably everything I've been doing because I am.
Yeah. Favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise, or you could give us a fiction book.
Probably Dianetics. Dianetics is an amazing book. It's the only book I ever read that really explained how the mind worked. And the fact that so many people came out against it proved to me that it was real because it was going to cost the psychiatric industry billions of dollars if people really read the book and understood it. Because there's no such thing as a Prozac deficiency. It doesn't exist. No one
For
has
sure.
a deficiency of a drug.
For sure. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
Cancer. But a lot of doctors, there's a lot of data out there right now that's leading up to that. The best book to read about cancer is, believe it or not, Hulda Clark. Have you ever heard of Hulda Clark?
No.
Hulda Clark was a physiologist and a nutritionist back in the 90s. And she had many degrees. She was also a pathologist. She discovered everyone's always saying the cure for cancer, the cure. We know what causes cancer. And Clark actually unraveled how the whole thing worked. So if anybody wants to really understand cancer and how it comes about, read any of her books. Hulda Clark is Hulda Clark. And her book, The Cure for All Cancers, is just mind-boggling because she has every single step in there about how cancer eventually occurs and how you can pull the string on it and get it to shut down.
Amazing. If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
Probably to knock out ignorance.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
Ignorance.
I was going to say. All right, last one in your opinion. What's the next frontier in wellness?
Well, it was Thomas Edison who said that the doctor of the future will not prescribe medicines. I'm going to paraphrase him, but he will enlighten his patient as to nutrition and proper care for the body naturally. And I would say we're going to start getting there. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is doing marvelous things to enlighten people on what's going on with the food and why the food is making people sick in this country. I mean, the rate of diabetes in this country is insane, especially in young people. And the food is to blame. Why are there different versions of cereals in Mexico? Kellogg has the same box, right? But yet when you look at what they put in the cereal in the United States compared to Mexico or some other country, it blows your mind what we've allowed them to do. So I would have to say along that line.
Yes. Well, Dr. Michael Biamonte, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more, and get in touch with you about your testing and your work.
Very simple. They can go to my main website, which is health-truth.com, or they can go to my two other websites, the New York City Candida Doctor and the New York City Thyroid Doctor. And you can find me at any of those three websites.
Excellent. We'll put links to everything in the episode notes for everybody. Again, just thank you for being here, and the way your time, your expertise, and the way you're sharing with everybody is much appreciated. So thank you.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.
Likewise. All right, friends. On Friday, in this week's bite-sized bonus episode, we're talking about Premier protein drinks. So Marianne B sent this one in through Instagram. So thank you, Marianne. She said typically she has one a day, either the chocolate or the vanilla, and asked if we would analyze or review. So we'll do it together on Friday in this week's bite-sized bonus episode. Be sure wherever you're listening, click the plus sign or the follow button, and then your app will alert you on Friday when it goes live. Well, as always, everybody, I'm Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideofries.com. Pick your platform, send a message. I truly love hearing from you and your ideas, your takeaways, your questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. Dr. Michael Biamonte, thank you again for being here.
You're welcome.
And friends, if you are not already a member, join us in the Happy Healthy Hub. You'll go to asaladwithasideofries.com/membership. This shows you support for this podcast, this community, and most of all, it supports your health. On top of this week's episode in full video with behind the scenes pieces, your 24/7 Ask Me Anything. You'll also get this week's recipe for the vegan almond butter chocolate chip cookies and 2 articles from this week's featured guest, one called Dr. Biamonte's Candida Chronicles Overview, and the other is microbiome and Hashimoto's. So until next week, remember, everything in the body is connected, and Candida may be worth exploring as you look at your hormones and your thyroid health.
Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.